All right, ballin' and brawling. We are back. Very special day, very special guest. One of the best coaches in MMA right now. Coaches champions like Francis Ngannou, Aljamain Sterling, Sean Strickland. Out of Xtreme Couture in Las Vegas, we got Eric Nicksick. Eric, thank you for coming on.
Man, my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right into this. This past weekend, the heavyweight championship of the world. We had Jon Jones defeat Stipe Miocic. Your guy, Francis Ngannou, although he's not under the UFC banner anymore, his name seems to always come up when we're talking about the heavyweights right now. First of all, what did you think of the fight? And, what do you think of his name just keeps coming up in the buildup for it?
Yeah, I think that's always going to happen because that's the fight that everybody wants to see, right? Like stylistically, the matchup, just two really, really good dudes that can scrap. Jon Jones obviously being pound for pound the greatest to ever do it, and the one guy that has the equalizer in Francis Ngannou, who's constantly building his skill set. We saw the way Francis looked against Renan Ferreira, showing other elements to his MMA game. So I mean that's always going to be the question. Unfortunately, it was like two ships passing in the night, man. We could have had that fight. When Francis beat Stipe Miocic, we were ready for July. For whatever reason, Jon Jones couldn't make it by then, and this back and forth. Francis hurts his knee; he's out for a year. So, unfortunately, it just never happened. But I'm an optimistic dude, man. I always feel like there's somehow, some way that fight can formulate its way down the path eventually. So we'll see. But as far as Saturday goes, man, I thought he looked good. Jon looked good enough to get the win, right? I wasn't like, I'm not trying to throw shade at him. He did everything he was supposed to do. But I thought Stipe looked old, man. I thought he looked old and slow. I just didn't really feel like he was present. That was something I think everybody worried about was how was he going to look with that long layoff? What was he doing in the meantime? That was a question at hand. So there was a lot of technical things that I thought Jon did very, very well to negate the forward pressure by Stipe. And that was the thing for me is like, how is Stipe going to approach the Jon Jones fight? I kind of figured how Jon would approach the fight versus Stipe.
Yeah, no, I always say the version of Francis that fought Stipe in, March of 21, I think that guy beats any heavyweight in the history of MMA, in my opinion. So I don't think that was like, Stipe was old. He was washed at that point. I think that was just how good Francis was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, that was not the Stipe that showed up in, 3 years ago. That was not the Stipe that fought DC. I agree with you. So the ship hasn't completely sailed. There's still a possibility of that fight somewhere down the line. I know I've heard Francis talk about it. So my eyes lit up a little bit when you said that. I got a little
Dana
excited.
would have to let the ego out the door a little bit to
there you go, Justin. There you go, man. I'm like Lloyd Christmas. Like, so you're saying there's a chance, right? There's enough money out there. There's enough guys that can make this happen. Although Dana is like the CEO, but he does have a boss, man. There's people above him. There's enough money that can move that needle to make this happen. So, hey, maybe somewhere down the line we can make this fight happen.
Eric, I just wanted to ask you, going back to Francis, we talked about his performance against Stipe, Stipe's last time in the octagon before his return this weekend. What was the biggest thing when Francis came to Couture, from France, that you kind of took and added, or not you, but just the whole camp added to his game? Because I was telling Hebler, like, that Francis we saw when he made the transition, like, just he evolved his game. I mean, everything about him, he looked pretty much unstoppable at that point. What were some of the biggest things you added to his game when he came over to your camp?
Oh, man, that's a great question. And so we sat down and had a dinner. It was just me and him. And I wanted to hear what he wanted, like where he felt that we could best suit him, the areas that he wanted to improve on. A lot of times I think that like in football, like you're jumping in a scheme and it's like this coach has a specific scheme. And if I don't fit this scheme, then I might not be playing for this guy. So I learned kind of the opposite. So my dad was a defensive coordinator and my dad coached at the high school level. But he always taught me that in high school, you don't get to recruit kids. You have to play the personnel that you have. So if my scheme is a 3-4, but I don't have a D tackle that can scramble some eggs, then I can't run a 3-4. I have to run something different. I have to modify to what the personnel is that I have. So as a coach, that's kind of something that I always adopted is I can't always just try to be the fighter or the coach that fits my ideology. I have to adapt to the fighter and try to find ways to make them successful. So the question that I posed to Francis was, what is your biggest fears? What are the things that keep you up at night? I mean, you're the baddest man on the planet. You're a scary dude that when you walk in the gym, everybody's like, oh shit. But what's your boogeyman? And he laid it out for me, bro. He was like, I never want to feel the same way that I felt when I fought Stipe the first time. I never want to not be able to wrestle. I never want to be stuck on my back. This is all these things. So inherently, I think the first mindset is, okay, we have to teach this guy defensive wrestling, right? Because, okay, this is his biggest fear. But I wanted to make it to where it was fun for him. So if I made you show up every day and do something you freaking hated, I don't want to do this. I'm just defending takedowns left and right. I thought, what if we made him an offensive wrestler? And by doing so, you can reverse engineer the thought process. If I'm able to take people down, I understand how to stop it as well, right? So it would just almost kind of a mind trick. Like, let's make it fun. And let's add these other attributes to your skill set. If you can't knock somebody out, we have offensive wrestling. But by doing so, inherently, you're going to learn defensive wrestling because that's part of the drill. So those are the biggest things I think was almost just kind of not necessarily tricking him, but giving him an option that made it more fun for him to show up every day. And lo and behold, man, like this guy started taking people down left and right. Like he's beating people up in the gym. I swear to you that before he injured his knee, the Camp versus Cyril Gane, that version of Francis Ngannou would have beat anybody on the planet. I feel like just the fight IQ, the evolution of him understanding what he's capable of from the feet to the floor, I think is really shown in his last few fights, especially against Cyril Gane, adjusting the game plan into the takedowns. And then against Renan Ferreira, man, like just, hey, double leg, dude. And then the ground and pound was vicious. So,
yeah, they're calling Francis Nurmagomedov, right? I think that's
right.
What they're calling him these days. But yeah, everyone points to that moment in the Stipe fight, and I'm sure you know what I'm referring to, when he stuffs the takedown and then he turns it in, he takes Stipe down himself. I think that was the moment everyone was like, holy fuck. Like, I don't think anyone's beating this guy. This is a different guy than that first Stipe matchup. Against Ferreira, so we're about a month removed at this point. So that was his first MMA fight in about 2.5 years. Obviously, you know, I can't imagine the emotions that he's been through with everything going on in his personal life, losing his son. And even before that, with the falling out with the UFC, now the UFC kind of painting him as a villain, goes over to boxing. I mean, the guy's had, the last 2.5 years have been super eventful for him and you guys. What was it like getting back into an MMA octagon? I'm sure you've got this question, but everyone kind of points to McGregor, right? He was, you know, the boogeyman. He goes to fight Floyd. He comes back. Obviously, probably had to do with a couple more zeros in his bank account as well. But his boxing stance. He was never the same fighter in the octagon when he came back from Floyd. Is that something that's kind of worrisome for you guys? And kind of a long-winded question, but could you just tell me about his return to MMA?
I think it can. I think there can be some reasons why you would feel that way, but I also have to point to the personal life of Conor. I think that what we see him doing outside of fighting is also a big detriment. And Francis doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't do drugs, so he's constantly training and constantly evolving. I'm not saying that Conor's not, but we also know what Conor is doing, So I feel like that. I feel like that does play into the fact that we see in this version of Conor that he doesn't seem hungry like he once was as a fighter, and that was to become a world champion. Your goals and your motives change over time. He's reached that mountaintop of being a double champ, and he's made all the money that he needs. So what moves him now? What makes him want to get up in the morning and go out and train and do the right things? And that's something that's never wavered with Francis. We've constantly been training, even though he's been boxing. We've constantly been looking to evolve. We didn't change a whole lot from when he left MMA into boxing. There were some things that I felt that we can continue on doing that would give Tyson Fury some problems that we do in MMA with the switch stances, switching over to southpaw, rolling into orthodox. There's some things I felt like we can be unorthodox versus a guy who is a very clean, cerebral boxer. We had to bring some different elements. So we were able to do some fun stuff and almost play some different schemes versus this guy, you know. So we had a good time doing it. But yeah, I mean, I think definitely with Conor, I would like to see him more focused on fighting than the other shit.
Yeah, who is that? Maybe George Foreman. I forget. It's hard waking up at 5 a.m. to run when you're sleeping in silk sheets. I think you've kind of seen that with Conor, right? And I don't blame him, right? Yeah, I think it's tough when you got a couple $100 million in the bank. You know, checking leg kicks is one thing, but when you can go back home to that, it's like, you know, maybe I'll just I don't know. I don't know how you do it, but
100%.
What's next for you guys? What's next for Francis? Is he going to stay with MMA? Will he have another boxing match in the future? I know him and Wilder, they've exchanged some words in the past. What's next? Will he continue to box, or do you see an MMA fight in the near future?
I mean, that's the nice part about it. He's an independent contractor now. So if he goes to the highest bidder, that's a beautiful thing about, like, you know, not being under the UFC banner, although we're not fighting, I would say, the best in the world when it comes to that. But we also have so many options now. You know, he was in the gym this morning. He sparred. He did MMA, took everybody down, beat everybody up, you know, just typical Francis fashion. But again, it's like, you know, hey, Wilder calls and it's for 25, 30, 40 million, whatever these numbers are. You know, he could sit down and kind of figure out what his next route is after kind of weighing out all of his options. So that's the beautiful thing about this, where his situation's at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I the Tyson Fury fight, that was one of my favorite moments as a combat sports fan. Francis, he might be my favorite fighter. He was one of the guys when I got into UFC. You hear his backstory, it's just like some right out of a movie, right? So, you know, I can't say enough with what you guys have done with him. Congratulations to you guys and him for all the success. I'm excited to see what's next. A little bit more about you. So I know you have a football background. We are obviously football guys, hence the name Ballin' and Brawlin'. Can you talk a little bit? So break it down for me. We went to the University of Nevada. I know you're as you mentioned, son of a high school football coach, which automatically makes you a badass, makes you a tough guy, right? But could you tell me about your football career before getting into MMA, and your college football career out at the University of Nevada? Also, wait, receiver or outside linebacker? Because I've seen some conflicting reports.
Okay, so yeah, I was a receiver. I was a receiver in high school by my senior year. So just an athlete. They moved me around wherever they needed me. I played a lot of strong safety for my dad. And then there was a lot of, like, you know, dad cussing me out bad on the field, you know, bad. So my uncle was our linebackers coach, you know, and my dad was our defensive coordinator. So I didn't get away with shit. And you know, my uncle was our strength and conditioning coach. And, you know, my dad was tough on me, not like extremely, but my uncle was the hammer. So my uncle was the one you're always afraid of. And so I played for both of those guys. And then my senior year, due to some injuries, I got moved to wide receiver. I played receiver, you know, both ways and up and down, quarterback, strong safety, corner, receiver. Finally, I was like, all right, can I stick to something so I can get some looks? And then so they put me at receiver my senior year. I was first team All-State wide receiver. But I think for me, the thing that popped the most on film was the fact that I love to block. I love to hit. You know, this is back when you can crack back on the linebacker and do some dirty shit to those linebackers. Like, blame the corner, bro. Blame the corner. He didn't yell crack. So I was sticking my helmet through people's heads. So, you know, that got me some good looks. And anywhere that I went to look at colleges, Wisconsin, Washington, you know, the bigger schools, they wanted to move me to strong safety. Red shirt, grow into your body. Let's see how you look when you get here under the program. You know, those guys back then, the TCUs of the world, Colorado States, they weren't recruiting 5-star guys. They were recruiting projection guys who they can get their hands on, who they can develop throughout their system. And then Reno was running. This is back when Tisdale was the coach, so this is before Alt was running the pistol. But they ran a pretty wide open offense to the point where, like, as a receiver, as an X, I can get in a rotation. And I can play pretty quick. But unfortunately, I got in some trouble when I was up in Reno. I was fighting a little too much. It was almost maybe daily. You know, we're getting in fights, and Some of them were organized, some of them weren't. And you know, I had that kind of last warning, if you will, like, hey, if one more altercation and we're gonna have to kick you out. And that's what happened, man. I got into a bad fight, got kicked out of school, and then driving back to Las Vegas with my dad. And that was probably like the most scared I've ever been in my life. You know, my dad had to bail me out of jail and then drive my ass home. And he's like, hey, what do you want to do, bro? And I had an offer from Dixie Junior College at the time. They were #1 in the country in junior college football. They're out in St. George, Utah. I was close to home. I had a lot of buddies of mine that I played on the All-Star team with that moved over to Dixie. They were playing there, and just called up the coach and said, is my scholarship still available? He said, yeah, come out. And that was that, man. I went out there and played my last 2 seasons of football as a strong safety. Ran a cover 2, so just true cover 2. And that was it, man. Finished up there. Had enough concussions, I think, that looking back at it, I was like, you know, we didn't have much information about concussions then. Yeah. There wasn't enough out there to where, or for me, I started to realize there was a personality shift. There was a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. I didn't understand the reasons why, but I kept, the biggest thing I noticed too, guys, was like, I couldn't regulate my temperature. I would be super cold in a super hot environment, or vice versa. I'd be breaking sweat when it was freezing. And I was like, man, something's up. But the biggest thing I noticed was like just the anxiety and the depression that I was going through. Came back home and met a guy, Dr. Brian Warner, and kind of talked to me about the concussion stuff and what was going on with my body. I had a vestibular and cerebral concussions. And thank God, like, I found him because he helped me kind of get through all that stuff. But that's when I decided, hey, man, my football career is over. Started looking into coaching more, started running some stuff for my uncle when he became a head coach, running some offense for him. Loved the game, loved the sport. Thought if I was going to be coaching, I was always going to be coaching football. But, you know, got into Xtreme Couture in 2007, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So
were you a pro style guy or a spread air raid type of guy?
You were a fullback, 2 tight ends. Come on, let's be real.
We were spread, bro. And even in high school, you know, I was an X receiver, so I wasn't afraid to go across the middle and catch the ball. I was a fade route guy. My daughter just made the flag football team, and she's running X. So last night it was fun because I was running some routes with her. So I was like, listen, I wasn't fast. She's faster than I am. I was like, I wasn't fast, but I can fucking run routes. And I was like, This is what you have to do to be a good receiver. It's all about route running. Yeah. And so, you know, it's been fun. I get to brush the cleats off again and get out there with her and move around with her and stuff like that, and show her some of the tricks of the trade.
There you go. Take it a little too serious. Don't pull a hamstring, right? So what led? Did you have like a wrestling background? So I was going to ask if you always knew you wanted to get into coaching. I kind of know a little bit of the backstory at Xtreme Couture. You were there before it opened the doors, the first official member. I mean, to go from that to, you know, the head coach, one of the best coaches in MMA, that's just an unbelievable transition. What brought you to MMA? Was this something that was always in the back of your head?
Trained a little bit all through high school. There was some small gyms out here. MMA wasn't a big thing, obviously. You know, this is like 94, 95. MMA had just the inception of MMA. When I got back from college, I was going back and forth, and then John Lewis had opened a gym called JSEC. He was probably the one American black belt jiu-jitsu guy that was all in Las Vegas. So would go train with him a little bit. But as you guys know, like under scholarships, we can't be doing certain shit.
Yeah.
And no one knew what it was. Yeah, no fighting. But no one knew what it was back then. I mean, snowboarding was like the biggest, you know, thing you can do that your coach is going to be pissed off about, right? But no one knew what like jiu-jitsu was. No one gave a shit. Yeah. And then so one day my coach had kind of mentioned that, like, you know, when we were going back home, me and a couple of the players were going out and training and stuff like that, and he caught wind about it. He's like, what is this, all this? He goes, you know, that's not under anything you can be doing with your scholarship, you know? So yeah, it wasn't until really I was done with football that I started taking a little bit more serious. But as you guys know, man, the game itself, like, you love the game itself, but it's the camaraderie. It's the guys, man. It's the locker room. It's the people. That's where I felt my most depressed, and what I missed the most about the sport was this shit. You know, like the bus rides, the shit talk, the locker room banter, and that's what I found immediately when I got to Xtreme Couture. It wasn't not necessarily like, oh, I want to be a pro fighter, I want to be a coach. I just wanted to be around like-minded individuals that were going to push me to be a better version of myself.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think that's kind of the big thing that, no one really prepares you for. With football, people say with any sport, but it's really for football, right? That locker room atmosphere, it's just so different than anything else you're going to find. So, I mean, nothing really prepares you for leaving that. And I think, me being a couple years out, Justin obviously is still playing, but, you're kind of just yearning for that in any area of life. It's hard to find. But with your football background, something you get a ton of love for, and rightfully so, is your in between rounds, your speeches to fighters. Is that where that kind of son of a coach, that football background, I kind of see it come out of you there? How does having that football background, do you think that helps you at all as an MMA coach? Because you really don't see, we were supposed to see one of my favorite fighters this past weekend, Eric Anders. He's one of the only guys I can think of that really played high level football and has made the transition to MMA. So I think that's, again, what makes your story so interesting. But do you see any of that kind of football guy in you? Does that guy come out at all?
Yeah, definitely depending on the personality. I think Dan Ige and I have such a good rapport when it comes to the corner. Like, I'll crack jokes at him at times. Sometimes I'm on his ass. Sometimes I'm serious. Sometimes, I think just having so many rounds together that we kind of know what each other needs. Obviously not each other, but what he needs, or how I need to deliver it to him, in certain messages with the way the fight's going, the complexion of the fight. My dad always said, like, you, as a coach, you have to be a set of janitor keys. You have to have a certain key to open every door or a certain door. So my approach is different for different fighters. You'll see with Sean Strickland, it's very much Sean, it's tough to wrangle in. He's just walking around like a caged animal. But I would tell him, hey, I just need 10, 15 seconds of your time. I'll give you what you need and I'll get out of your hair. Where other guys, you kind of have to jump their ass, or you just have to give them technical advice depending on the situation. So definitely football has helped me with that because, playing quarterback, as a young kid, I would be a fiery ginger yelling at everybody. And I remember my dad telling me that. He's like, you can't talk to everybody that same way. Yeah. Right. You're going to have to find a different approach. One kid's going to cry. The other one, you're going to grab by the face mask. Right. Like, you got to talk to him different. So that definitely helped me, I think, in my growth as becoming a coach and learning how to speak to a few of the guys.
Hey, speaking of Ige, what was it like, I would say 6 months ago when he took the Lopez fight on 24 hours, less than 24 hours notice? Like, how crazy of a event was that for you as a coach? Like, were you just like hanging around the gym? You're like, hey, we're fighting. Like, what went into that?
Man, it was so cool. So we had a fighter, Kai Kamaka, fought for PFL the night before. We landed from South Dakota. I was cornering Roman Dolidze that night. I just gotten home, and I get a call from Dan, and it was like super frantic. It was like, called and I didn't answer, or he text messaged me and I didn't answer. Something happened, and then finally he was like, yo, dickhead, call me back. And I was like, so I called him, like, what's up? And he's like, we might be fighting tonight. I was like, okay, like, what, like, who, like, what's going on? And then like, I gotta call you back, and hangs up. I was like, what the fuck? So I just started getting my mind ready, like looking at the thing. I'm like, all right, well, it's probably either Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez, or like, we're fighting tonight. Like, how's this gonna work? All these questions. And then he calls me back again. He's like, all right, I don't know if it's 100%, but it might be Diego Lopez. I have my mouthpiece. I don't have my cup. Can you just get to the gym and get my cup? Meet me at the house. I was like, bet. That was that.
That's all you need.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's all. I mean, he's like, I got my mouthpiece. I just need my cup. Can you go grab my cup on the way here? And I was like, yep, you got it. So in the meantime, I looked at my wife. I'm like, man, this is what legends are made of. If this all goes through, this is going to be history. Like, this guy's hopping in, fighting a guy who's climbing the ranks, and this is who and what Dan Ige is, So he trains like this. He trains like this daily. There's not a card that goes by where he sends me a text message that's like, hey, take a look at these fighters in case somebody drops out. So this is something he's like, I've literally always prepared for. And so I got to his house, and then we got the call, like, when we were there, like, hey, it's on. You guys are in. So grab your shit, grab your cup and mouthpiece, and I'll see you guys at the arena. And that was it, bro. It was history.
Crazy.
What time was that at, roughly? When did this whole thing start?
4:30, and the main card starts at 7 here in Vegas. Main card's going to start at 7. So 4:30 local time. You know, and he got there. He had to step on the scale. He had to weigh like 160. They made it a catch weight. It was one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. I said, what are we going to do about corner? He goes, I don't know. You deal with that. So I called Kai Kamaka. Kai's usually always in our corner. Kai had just fought. I said, hey, bro, meet me on the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Silverado Ranch. Be there in 20. Bring your gear. He's like, what the fuck's going on? I was like, I don't know. Dan might be fighting. He goes, all right, I'll see you over there. You know, picked up the phone, called Strickland. I was like, where are you at? And he's like, I'm at lunch with my girl. I was like, can you meet me at the T-Mobile at 6 o'clock? Ige's fighting. He's like, yep, check, please. He's like, I'll meet you there, bro. So, you know, we just straight up called the mercenaries and brought them all in and went and fought.
Fuck, it's so bad.
Almost
That's what
had
like,
it too.
sport is
Almost
all
had
about.
it.
Almost had it, man.
He'll always be a legend for that. I mean, that third round, I thought he got pretty close there, but like everyone in the UFC just says anytime, anyone, anywhere. Like that guy is the true embodiment of that. And I think, you know, that's
100%.
Like you said, that's what legends are made of, right? Everyone.
Well, if he wasn't fucking around saying hello to Joe Mazulla, he might have finished the fight. You know, he's over there talking to Coach Mazulla. Hey, Coach. I'm like, fuck, bro, let's finish this guy.
Mazulla's a fucking psychopath. That's another UFC guy.
That's my guy. Joe, we're all very close with Joe. Joe's part of the family. Yeah, Joe and I are very close. We talk probably once or twice a week.
He's a true fan, right? Because some people, everyone
he
says
is a true fan.
He seems like he knows his stuff.
Yeah, he came out. So the last summer league, he came out and visited with myself and Dan Ige, Brad Tavares. He wanted to talk to me a little bit about kind of that corner work. He said, hey, I get 1 minute and a timeout to talk to my team. He said, I think you're the best to do it in MMA. I'll kind of want to pick your brain on how you handle corner in a fight. So, dude, it's him and Sam Cassell and Dan Ige, myself. We sat in my office for, I don't know, a couple hours and just talk the sport, talk the game. And so, you know, we became Joe Mazulla fans more than we became Boston Celtics fans, you know, and I'm a huge Florida State guy. So Sam Cassell sitting in my office is pretty cool. And being able to kind of talk to him, but we became invested in one another. So myself, Dan, Brad, when Brad fought in Boston, Joe was there. We had Joe in the pictures in the back. Yeah. So he's part of the family. We stick together now. We talk all the time. We you know, whether it's sports or family or faith or whatever it is, you know, Joe's a great human being.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing, I don't know if this was a true story now that I think about it, but he was so angry after a loss that he was just like rolling BJJ for a couple hours and he like blew out his knee. I don't know if that's true, but it definitely, there we go. It does sound like him. My condolences about Florida State, by the way. Just get that.
Oh, bro,
we're ACC guys.
I gotta wear it, bro. It's bad.
We can move on.
We can, brother.
No.
A lot of friends and family are big Florida State fans, and they're devastated this year.
Oh, dude, it's bad. I want to fucking fire everybody, but you know what do you do?
It looks like that's right. I think we're looking at Dion next year, but
roll it out.
Back to that, the corner advice is that's where. Because you mentioned a little bit earlier how like you kind of got to walk the line with some of these guys between like being a good friend and being a coach. You also have so many different personalities. I mean, from the outside looking in, Sean Strickland and Francis Ngannou look like about the most different personalities as possible. When you have that minute in there, how much of that is like technical advice and how much of it is Strickland versus Izzy, where you're just like, you know, go get after this motherfucker. We're not losing a decision. Is that depend on the fighter or the way the fight is playing out, or, you know, what goes into that 1 minute?
All of the above. And I think, so for me, I'm almost categorizing the most important thing I can think of in that moment that needs to get out. What are they going to retain the most? So when Sean dropped Izzy in round 1, right, and it was right at the end of the round, there was so much chaos and pandemonium that like I had to remind myself to stay calm and stay in the moment because there's pertinent information that I wanted to get across to Sean, right? In that moment of chaos, I remember like there was nothing I can say or do that's going to change the outcome of the fight if the ref stops it. He can't hear me. The more I scream, it's wasted energy. So I actually stopped and looked over at like Anik and DC and Sanko and just watched their reaction because it kept me kind of in the moment. And if they stop it, they stop it. If not, I knew that Izzy was setting up the same side head kick out of southpaw. Every time Izzy moved to southpaw, he was getting Sean to parry but slip the direction of the same side head kick. So I wanted to make sure that that was the first piece of information I get. Hey, great round, but this dude's setting you up with the same side high. and here's what he's doing, and here's how he's doing it. If there's any information that you're going to retain, listen to me now, because this dude's going to fucking knock you out with his head kick. And that was the main thing after round 1. But then as the rounds kept going on, that's when I was like, hey, you're getting snake charmed by this guy. You're watching him. Here's the pressure we need to add. And he might not retain everything, knowing Sean. It's just like, get it, put it through his head, and then move him on. Whereas like with Dan, I can exhaust that entire minute. I can give him time to breathe. I can give him motivation. I can give him technical advice. And I know he's going to retain everything to the best of his ability in that moment. Same with Francis. Like sometimes I'll crack jokes with Francis. You know, I had to have him on the stool too many times. You know, he's finishing fights really.
Usually doesn't get there, right? You're picking him up over your shoulders. Somehow,
but
actually, I don't know how the fuck you do that, but
after round 1 in the second Stipe fight, you know, I got him on the stool. I was like, hey, this is nice, man. I've never had you on the stool before, you know? And he's shit. Yeah, you're right. Well, I've knocked everybody out in the first round since we moved over, you know?
Yeah, so, that's why you were cool. Talking about leg kicks and wrestling, too, at the end of the first. So you were like, I don't know who the fuck this guy is. We're making it out of the first round. You're wrestling. I don't know. This is not the old Francis. But speaking of Sean Strickland, so obviously a very polarizing guy. I'm sure you get asked all these like bullshit questions about him all the time. But I'll never forget when he started to come up when, he was saying some maybe controversial things. I'll never forget Chael Sonnen came out and he's like, Chael is obviously playing a little bit of a character. He's like, oh, I know Sean personally, and this is all made up. That's not his true personality. He's kind of just saying these things for a reaction. I think that is very clearly not the case. Can you tell me a little bit about this guy outside of the octagon? Because, again, a very polarizing figure, one of the biggest stars in MMA, I would say right now. What type of guy is Sean Strickland when the cameras aren't on?
Man, I'll tell you what, Dan's in my office right now, and he would second this. Sean is one of the best teammates you're ever going to find. And I stand by that. Like he is an asshole. We don't 100% agree with a lot of the things he says or that comes out of his mouth. We actually, it's the one environment that I feel like we're all safe is the NFL locker room or the MMA locker room, where it's everybody's culturally diverse. Everybody comes from different ways of life, walks of life, where Sean can joke around and say shit about the Muslims, say shit about the Israeli guys, the Palestinians, right? And everyone loves him because it's just a South Park episode. It really is. And when you understand that, like, he can joke with you, but at the same time, if you need it around, this guy's gonna give you everything that you need and to be there for you, to be a teammate for you and help you and do everything that you need. And by doing so, you earn the respect out of everybody in the room. Like, he's not going to tell you I'm going to be there and not show up. He does. He shows up. And not only does he show up with 100% intensity, and he wants to see the best from you, out of you. That's his approach that people don't really understand. And he reminds me a lot of my uncle. My uncle was very tough on us because he knew what you were capable of. He wanted to get the best out of you. It was tough love. He might have called you a pussy. He might have said these things about you, right? But that's his way of showing that he cares and he wants to get the best out of each individual in this room.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned with like the locker room, man, because when you hear, especially in the world today with this kind of like PC culture, if you will, you're like, if in a locker room, whether it's MMA, whether it's football, some of the stuff that gets said is obviously not really socially accepted, right? But again, I always think that with him, it's like he doesn't seem like a bad guy at all. He's just not afraid to speak his mind. So obviously you understand some of the backlash, but
he's a throwback, man. I swear to you guys, when you guys are in Vegas, Justin, you're in Vegas this weekend, right? You coming in town?
Absolutely.
Okay, come by the gym. Come by when you get in town. And you guys will be around and see the culture in this room. And it's like, dude, it's the best vibe and feeling that I swear to you, we were talking about this last week. It's like the one sacred place is a locker room and an MMA gym. And if you walk in, like, and you got your camera rolling, shut that shit off because we're not getting canceled.
Yeah, absolutely. We so on some away games we'll roll in on Fridays, cool. Which is nice. So if we do that, I gotta see if we do that this week. I'd love to stop by. Otherwise we'll be Saturday night, so that'll kind of be tough. But hey, if you're not doing anything on Sunday, let me know. we'll get you right for the game if you're not doing anything. Yeah, let me know. But just speaking more on Sean, like, so he obviously went from welterweight to middleweight. You know what I mean? And it ended up being a huge thing for his career, a huge positive in his career. What was like some of the biggest things that you would say kind of changed in maybe his style or just physically for him going up a weight class, not at the end of his career, but, in the middle of his career? He fought at welterweight for a while. So
nothing that I think that was overly too technical. The one thing technical was his fight against Kamaru Usman. He played too much jiu-jitsu and stayed off his back, and that's never happened again.
Yeah.
He just made a decision like, listen, I need to change the way that I approach the game, and it's more of an MMA mindset rather than a jiu-jitsu mindset. So those are one of the technical things that I think that he's changed. But this, to me, is more of a mental thing. This became about accountability. He was a finger pointer. Everything that went wrong was somebody else's fault, right? This is, and then one day he came in and was, let me think. He was probably 20 minutes late for a sparring session. He was kind of cross-training around at a bunch of gyms, kind of a nomad. And I've known Sean since 2014, so I didn't care if he came and trained or not. It didn't matter to me. He was just one of those guys that when he shows up, he gives good rounds. If not, then whatever. I never really considered him much of a teammate. Showed up 10 minutes late for practice, for a sparring practice, and no one would spar him. There was no rounds available. So his mindset was, all of you guys are pussies. No one wants to spar me. So I pulled him aside and I said, hey, man, what time did you show up today? He was like, well, I was a little late. I said, well, did you know that the guys get their rounds lined up around 3 o'clock, 3:15, right? So no one in here is a pussy, but you're just a late asshole who didn't get his rounds lined up. So maybe if you showed a little bit of accountability, showed up on time, and was more of a professional, then you'd have rounds. And he's like, oh, shit, okay, all right. Maybe now he shows up at 2:45 every day, right? But my whole point to him was, do the simple things perfectly, because this sport is hard enough. The cards are stacked against you at this level of MMA, at this level of football, that if you aren't prepared and you're not showing up on time and doing the simple things right, the hard shit's hard enough.
Yeah.
So don't leave crumbs on the table that or on your plate, and that now it's everybody else's fault that you didn't get your rounds. No, your rounds are available had you been here earlier on time. So we started doing more and more of that, of more soul searching. Hey, making yourself accountable. Now, how do you make a guy a leader in the room? You give him responsibility. I started giving this guy more and more responsibility. All right, bro, you're gonna run the 10 a.m. sparring practice because it's the bigger guys. We'll have you run a little bit more of that. Really, you're gonna let me run it? Yeah, I want you to run it. So what does it give the guy? It gives the guy self-accusation, gives him responsibility, makes him feel a part of something, makes him feel a part of the team. You put that team captain label on a guy like that. What happens to him? He flourishes, right? Yeah. So the nomad renegade outlaw that didn't want to be here, show up late, try to beat up everybody, is now your biggest ally. He's your biggest teammate. He's the biggest guy that you can rely on in the room. So a lot of it just became about culture shift and making him understand that this is a team sport. Once the cage door closes, now it's an individual sport. You're fighting on your own, but you're only as good as the team you surround yourself with.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You're getting me fired up just talking about it, man. But with him, you got something, Justin?
No, yeah, I was just gonna ask you. You were talking about the Izzy fight, and just going back to that, like, he's obviously fought the who's who of welterweight and middleweight. And when I look at it, I'm like, all right, he's fought Usman, he's fought Pereira, he's fought Izzy, he's fought DDP. Which of those guys would you say was the toughest to prepare for in camp for him?
Well, I only had him for the three. I didn't have him for the Usman fight. The Alex Pereira fight was the best I've ever seen him in camp. That because he fucking wrestled, and that was the game plan, was to wrestle. He was in here taking down Ankalaev left and right. Ankalaev was one of our main training partners, and he was out wrestling Ankalaev. So I'm like, great, this is it. This is the path to victory. We win this fight. We get a fight, Izzy. And then, so this is a great story. So we're in the locker room, we're warming up. We got Edmund Shabazian back there with us as a training partner. And Sean warms up like it'd be the equivalent of us warming up in football and going full speed, full tackle, Oklahoma drills for the warm up. Right? Like, this is how this dude warms up in the back. And I'm like, all right, man, we need to slow it down a little bit. He's like, I gotta be ready for this guy. I gotta be ready for. I'm like, motherfucker, you got to be ready to wrestle. Like,
Yeah.
this is the game plan. So as he's warming up in the back, the game plan is not to just come out and shoot right away. Maybe 30 seconds, a minute in, just make an attachment. Just get an attachment to make the guy feel like we want to wrestle. And then we can do some things, right? We're going to run an ISO just to see if we get the linebackers to fucking move up, right? Just something. And so he's warming up, and then he looks over at me in the back, and he's like, all right, let me know when it's a minute. First minute. And I'm like, minute? Like that? Bro, now we're playing with fire.
Yeah.
Round goes on, round continues, finally gets, finishes his warm-up, and we're walking out the back. We're walking down the hallway of T-Mobile. I'll never forget this. He's like, right before we get to the curtain, he looks back at me and goes, tell me when it's halfway. I'm like, halfway? No, that's not the game plan, bro. Tell me when it's halfway. And sure as shit, man, we're in this fight, and I'm watching the fight, and I remember looking up, I'm like, halfway, and just fucking boom, he's knocked out. I'm like, God damn it, bro. Literally, as I'm like, I want to know what the time was on the finish, because I literally was like, halfway.
I think it was exactly halfway. It was like exactly halfway, right?
And I was making shit up to Edmund. I'm like, I'm going to tell him halfway when it's 90 seconds. I'm just
right in
halfway. Like, just shoot, motherfucker. Well, so that was probably one of the fights where, like, you just, like, the game plan was perfect, and then you just didn't want to execute it. Like, you just totally went away from an entire week of breaking down film, having a game plan versus a guy, and I just changed the fucking first 15 plays. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So it was funky, man. And then the Izzy fight, honestly, there was a lot of paths to victory, I felt like, but the path to victory was Sean. It was his style. That was the thing we leaned on the most. So in that fight, there was some keys that I had. I broke down the Alex Pereira fight and Izzy fight for ESPN. And I said in that breakdown, the best way to stop Izzy is to get him on the barrier and get him on the barrier to try to isolate his 45-degree angle movement, where he can slide in and out of stances freely and be able to snipe you. But if you can find the barrier, you eliminate some of his movement. So it's basically using him using like a sideline. Like, I know I have something to occupy you. Yeah. And so once we started to teach him a little bit more about cage control and cutoff, I think he started to understand how to trap him and put him on where his feet got squared, where he wasn't in any stance. So that became a lot of the game plan, and it's really just because of Sean's pressure. And then during the fight, man, it was pretty cool because I just the whole time just calling out Izzy's plays. I was like fucking Luke Kuechly the whole time. I'm like, oh, same side head kick, here it comes. And like after the fight, like Izzy literally said to me, he's like, dude, you're calling out all my reads. I'm like, yeah, because I fucking watch you all the time, bro.
Yeah. Well, is that something that, like, this is kind of a weird question, but like, so I remember Izzy gave you a ton of praise after that, just saying, like, Nicksick kind of called out everything. I was getting mad in the fight. He knew my next move. Where does that come from? Because, like, obviously you hear guys, and I know we're talking forever, but I want to get to DDP in a second. But I heard him recently talk about, like, these game plans, watching film, strategies going in, and you never know how serious guys are. But he's like, oh, I was watching a technical breakdown, and I was like, I didn't fucking think any of that. I was just out there fighting. I know a lot of fighters let it go to their coaches. They kind of the coaches are the ones who break it down. They tell me what to do, etc. But, like, what is different? Like, what are you seeing in these fights? Because, again, no one did that to Izzy. Pereira got him with like 2 minutes left in the fight. He had a couple losses, but, like, nobody did what Sean Strickland did to Izzy. He walked him down for 25 minutes. He jabbed his face off. So, like, what was it that you were able to see? I know you just mentioned the specifics, but what goes into that film study that, you're able to find these things that, like, nobody else is able to find?
I mean, we come from a defensive pedigree from football. So what are we doing? We're just charting plays. We're looking for repetition, for the same thing over and over and over. See if we can find something, right? Like, all right, the ball's on the right hash. It's 3rd and 15. This is what they tend to do. You're playing the percentages. Yeah. That's really it, man. Like, we're in Vegas. You play blackjack. You play the percentages, right? What does he do off of this? It's not 100%, but it's up there. So, when I break down film, that's what I'm looking for, man, is just really tendencies. I'll watch what he does when he's southpaw. I'll try to go back and plug in tape. If he's fighting a southpaw versus a southpaw, what does he do? Then it comes down to a lot of body language and rhythm. right? Like, okay, he feints this to throw this, he does this to throw that. And we didn't get overly too technical when it comes to Sean, because remember, like sometimes your coordinator might have all this and then it's too much bandwidth for the players.
Yeah.
And they're like, fuck, man, I'm not going to retain all this. Some guys, you know, you got a Peyton Manning or a Luke Kuechly type that he's almost a coach on the field where he's the one that's retaining all this information and putting it to his players. So for me, it was a lot of like, I'll take on the information, but I'll give him as much as he needs in the moment, because I know Sean is just it's going to just bog down the fucking Wi-Fi. Like he's going to be, dude, I don't know all of this, you know, because he's not, he's not overly technical fighter. He's a feel fighter, and he's a pressure type of fighter. So, but what it did do, Connor, was it was allowed me to really understand Izzy more than I think really Izzy understood himself in those moments, right? I was being able to call him out and call the reads and things like that, because there was so much tape on him, man. There's so much tape on him. There's so much information I could gain from him.
Yeah, no, I thought that was so cool. Even Izzy, obviously, he seems like a good dude. There was a little bit of animosity going into the fight, but right after, I remember he was just singing your praises. And I mean, that's what led to, I mean, again, you got a lot of respect after that fight, because Izzy had been, 20 fights, 15 fights into the UFC, and nobody was able to find those things. Just a few. So I'll never forget, going into the Pereira fight, obviously you guys planned to wrestle. All he was saying was like, I don't care, world champion, kickboxer, whatever. No one can outstrike me. I'm going to walk him down, all these things, right? Obviously, we know how that fight. But then he came out, and all that stuff he said he was going to do to Pereira, he did to Izzy. So, he was right. While he looked wrong for a little bit in the Pereira fight, he did get proven right. A lot of people credit that to his sparring. So we see now sparring has become, a topic of conversation. You see a Max Holloway say he doesn't spar at all. And then you see Sean Strickland say, I fucking spar every day, and I spar like I'm going to war. He also spars some streamers, some Twitch streamers, things like that. Maybe I could get in there with them, see what happens. But so is that, everyone says, I know Rogan's a big thing. He says, his distance management is as good as anyone, even when he's fighting a taller, longer guy like an Izzy. Does that come from, his sparring? And, what do you think of sparring in MMA today? Does he do it a little too much? Does it depend on the fighter? What is going into, how much you're doing the sparring?
Well, it's more to me about his defense. Sean isn't taking a lot of damage in sparring because he's so defensively sound. Now, one sparring session for a certain individual in the room might be 3 sparring sessions equivalent of getting hit by Sean, right? For Sean. So if Sean was taking these sparring sessions and there was just a lot of damage and his legs getting beat up, and he's getting punched too much and everything else, then that's something where we'd say, like, look, man, like you might need to slow it down or take it back a little bit. But he's not taking any damage during sparring. So for me, it's more of a timing thing for him. He feels comfortable in the chaos. His best cardio comes from his hard sparring. He's not, very rarely is he sparring guys and it's like this like little touch or this or that. Like, he's going pretty hard. It's pretty spirited rounds because, he just comes from that mentality. He's like, practice how you play. And I think that's what makes him so good is cage time. But to answer your question, Connor, he's not taking a lot of damage in those rounds. So I feel confident that he's able to do this amount of sparring when he is in camp.
Gotcha. Yeah. One more. So, again, I couldn't find the video of this. Obviously, everyone knows Sean's next fight should be for the title, a rematch with DDP. I know you're not going to spill too much. Is there any update with that fight? I know he's saying now that he doesn't want to do it in Australia because people are saying that fight might be for February. Obviously, we saw what Khamzat did a couple weeks ago. I know you have, you've trained with Khamzat a little bit as well. Dana has just recently said that Khamzat could be next for the belt after previously saying it was Sean. Do you have any updates on what's next for Sean Strickland?
We were told possibly March. That's what we were told, our last little update. Sure. Because it was in the States. It has nothing, like Sean loves loves Australia, loves the people of Australia, loves Sydney. right? We won that whole fucking continent over. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But obviously the government wasn't too happy with Sean. And Sean gave him some reasons not to be too happy with him, right? So
I wonder why. What did he say?
Yeah, Jesus Christ. So yeah, I mean, that's a crazy story too, because we almost got pulled from that fight. Right? Not a lot of people know that. It was literally the night before weigh-ins, and we were still possibly getting pulled from that fight, and it was going to be Cannonier. Yeah, because there was so much. Yeah, because there was some bullshit that Sean pulled.
There we go.
And I'm like, oh, bro, we flew all the way out here to. Oh man, like we flew all the way to Australia to get pulled. Like, come on, man.
So what happened? It was the last minute. They ended up letting him fight. It was how close was it?
I mean, he barely got his ass in the country as it is, right? We got there, and I mean, everybody blows right through freaking customs, and then Sean's just stuck. We're like, what the fuck? And then like he's sitting in the border control area for like 2.5 hours. I'm like, bro, they ain't gonna let this dude in, bro. This is a wrap. So finally they let him in. We get to the hotel. We're there like 10 days early. We have an off day. So I go and I'm going to watch Florida State LSU. And these guys are going to go to Bondi Beach or whatever the hell it was. So I'm like, all right, have a good day. I'm going to watch the game. Don't get in any trouble. I get a call like 2 hours later. It's our manager. He's like, are you with Sean? I'm like, no, I'm watching the football game. Why? What's going on? He's like, he just punched a fan. I'm like, wait, what? What? At the beach? Like, what the fuck? So, and so some guy comes up to him and asks for a photo, and Sean had been so gracious to everybody. Photos, taking time, autographs. And the guy's like, yeah. Sean's like, yeah, let's get a photo. Sean takes a photo of the guy, and the guy goes, I hope Izzy knocks you out. Like, as he has his arm around him.
Yeah.
So Sean just punches the guy in his belly.
Oh.
Like, just joking around, like, hits him. And I guess it kind of turned into this big old stink. So no one hears anything. We're all good. Nothing comes about. We're like, shut the fuck up. Don't say anything about it. So Sean, being the idiot that he is, does his interviews, and they're like, how has Australia been? He's like, oh, Australia's been awesome. I love it. All the people have been great, except for one asshole that I had a punch in his stomach for blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, bro, you just gave yourself up. You just like, now the government is calling the UFC. They're looking for the guy that Sean punched. They're trying to get Sean kicked out of the country. I'm like, you just gave ourselves up on an interview telling you punched the guy in his guts. Like, God damn it, Sean. So yeah, this. I mean, literally, it came down to like the weight. We're cutting weight and waiting for our fate, man. Hoping that Hunter wasn't going to pull us from the car.
Jeez, there we go. That's the Sean Strickland experience summed up right there, right?
Buckle up, boys.
I just got like one or two more things. Could you name a fighter? I know we've talked all about these champions. Obviously, you got a ton of very high-level fighters. Could you name someone at Xtreme Couture, whether or not they're in the UFC, that you see as like a guy who's next up, kind of a young contender? You've been around some champions, so I'm sure you know what it takes to make someone into that. Is there anyone that's kind of relatively unknown that you're training with that you think is next up?
Yeah, I got two. So Daniel Zellhuber, he's a 155er.
What a fucking fight! Yeah,
savage, bro, savage. If it wasn't for his crazy Mexican heart and toughness, I think he wins that fight if he was just a little bit more tactical in certain areas. But I mean, dude, he won so many fans over with that war that he had. But
and he's young.
He's young, man. He's a baby. Yeah. And then my other kid, Mansour Abdul Malik. Mansour fought last week. He knocked out Dusko Todorovic in the first round. He was a Contender Series guy. Athleticism through the roof. Wrestled at University of Maryland. Really, really good kid. Just squared away. He's another one that just jumps off the page when you talk about athleticism. Sean was in the corner with us for that fight, and like, bro, Sean is just wild. And so Mansour just a physical specimen, good looking kid. And we're walking out, and Sean's like, all right, just be big and black and scary. Like, and Mansoor looks back at him, just gives him like double thumbs up.
Oh shit, man!
And just goes out there and just beats the shit out of Dusko. So it was funny, man. Like Sean and him, Sean has really taken Mansoor under his wing and has helped him a ton. And it's not necessarily technical things; it's just more about being a professional. So those two that are in the UFC right now, man, they really jump off the page with I think talent, athleticism, but moreover their work ethic and the type of kids that they are. I think they're going to be, ranked in the UFC period pretty quick, and then fighting for world titles.
I know obviously with MMA just becoming increasingly more popular, you're seeing people start to train younger and younger, getting more popular in the US as well. Obviously, wrestling has kind of always been known as the best base for MMA. We've seen guys like Izzy and Pereira come in and take over the UFC, coming right from kickboxing. Would you say there is what's the best base for MMA right now? Or would you say it's more so now these guys that are actually starting out as MMA fighters? I know that's what everyone says with O'Malley, kind of this new breed of fighter who it wasn't like, he was a wrestler. It wasn't like he was this jiu-jitsu guy. He started out with all aspects of MMA. Is that where the sport is going? Or do you still see, these specialists coming up and kind of taking over the sport?
Man, you nailed it. And that's a great observation, bro, because so I was running the kids program like 10 years ago. I was running the kids program, and then the kids in here, there's 4, 5, 6-year-old kids. What other sports do you play? Nothing. What do you like? Do you play football? Do you go to soccer, baseball? Nope. I do jujitsu, I do wrestling, and I do striking. And now I'm looking at these kids that I once had that are now making their way into pro MMA. So one of our kids, Zion, he's a 2-time state champion wrestler. He started with us when he was 7 years old. His senior year is coming up. He's defending his state championship. He wants to get into MMA right away. So these kids aren't playing other sports. It's crazy, bro. Like, I mean, that's how we came up. Like we did everything. And now it's like they're hyper focused on this one sport. And that's what I think you're seeing the evolution of the game is these kids. Well, what sport do you play? I play MMA. And that's all I do all day long. And they're literally like they're as technical as can be. They're hiring some of the best coaches in the world to be with them from the inception of when their career starts. You're starting to see a lot of turnover now, meaning parents that were former MMA fighters. Antonio McKee, now he has AJ McKee. You're seeing Chris Brennan, now he has his son Lucas. There's all these accomplished fighters. Randy Couture, then there was Ryan, right? All these accomplished fighters. You're starting to see their kids now starting to perform in MMA, and you're going, oh shit, this kid's really, really good. Well, he's really good because when he was in diapers, he was doing triangle chokes, So there's a huge shift, Connor, in what you're seeing now in the development of these kids, that they're not really playing any other sport. And to answer your question, I would take, for me, if you lined them all up and said, hey, you have an All-American wrestler, that is usually the kid that I would take over anybody, mainly just because of the grittiness, the way that they train, the way they cut weight. But we can always take somebody down and we can figure out the rest from there. So I would always usually take the wrestler if I had the choice.
Justin, you got anything?
No, man, I appreciate you coming on, Eric. Seriously, it means a lot, man. We really enjoyed this.
Yeah,
sorry, it's my pleasure, man.
Running a little late. I just got a little excited, but yeah, man, I can't thank you enough. Really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, hopefully we could get you on again, but best of luck. I know we got some big fights coming up in the coming weeks. I mean, you're a freaking busy. I got big fights coming up pretty much every week. So man, we can't thank you enough for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this offseason we'll be out in Vegas for multiple cards for sure.
Yeah, come through, boys. Anytime you need anything, come through. Love to have you guys in the gym and check everything out. You guys want to train or whatever, come through. You guys have a home.
Hey, we'd love to put some work in. Just tell Sean, I don't know if I'm smart.
Take it easy,
We'll put you with Francis. Francis first, then you can have Sean.
I know he seems to hate podcasters and sparring. I see every day it's like a new influencer just got his head taken off. So if he could play nice, that'd be cool with me. But it would make
we always joke, and this is like Max Crosby and I talk about this all the time. He goes, this is the only sport where a guy can come off the streets and hop into sparring. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't get to walk into the Raiders facility and go run routes today. It just doesn't work that way. So
Yeah.
I tell these guys, I go, you should take offense to somebody coming off the streets and going, hey, I can spar with you, or I want to hang with you, or I want to jump into your practice. I go, you should take offense to that. And you should beat the fuck out of these guys.
But
Hey,
seems
if I fought Ige, would Ige spark me unconscious?
oh my gosh. Oh my goodness.
He's got some ungodly power, bro. Like I know you play linebacker, I don't know, but Ige would definitely try to put your lights out.
Oh, he would whoop my ass for sure. We always go back and forth. If like the smaller division guys would put us out cold, we go back and forth with it.
I've been hit by him. I've been hit by Dan, and it's definitely sat me down. Like he hits fucking hard, you know. But he's just a different breed at that division. But yeah, there's some guys in here that can crack, bro.
Yeah. This I had to sneak this in now because this is like the age-old locker room question. It's usually more of a woman, Ronda Rousey, or someone. We won't get into that. Fighting a woman. I won't ask you that, but. Would it like a 125, 135 pound champion? Are they beating, Justin's a little bit of a bum. We've had our time in the A gap that kind of usually went my way, but any other NFL linebacker is like who at 35? We got Figgy this weekend. Is Figgy piecing up whoever?
He's piecing me up. I'm just saying, am I going
all right,
out?
Who's winning in a fight? Who's winning in a fight?
I take the MMA guy. So we call them green lights, right? So if a guy comes in that's an asshole or somebody that all right, bro, we're gonna green light this guy. We're gonna whoop his ass. What I usually do is I put my Hawaiian 125er Puni Pagoa. I put him on any one of them because here's the thing: is like it's not like you got Francis knocking you out, right? Yeah. You got this 125er skilled Hawaiian boy that's fucking you up. Yeah. Right. And I'm like, well, I just gave you the lowest guy on the totem pole. He's not the lowest on the totem pole. He's the smallest. Yeah. So we'll give you him, and he's just full of piss and vinegar, and he's trying to knock your brains in. And then we can just move up the line if we had to.
I saw that. Was that Chris Curtis, like the undefeated street fighter? He came in, and I remember that was like a big thing. But it seems like you guys kind of encourage that. I know some gyms maybe want. Yeah. You're like, let's go. If you want to talk that shit, you got to walk the walk, huh?
It always is depending on how you treat my front desk. Like if you're an asshole to the front desk ladies. And we catch wind that you're a dick. Oh, we're fucking you up. And so Chris took it easy on the guy. That's for sure. The guy was like, I'm 200-0. I'm an all-state wrestler from California. And you could look at him and go, bro, you ain't all shit. I don't think so. Yeah. All shit. So, we put him in with Chris and Chris took it so easy on him. And it was like the first minute, the guy's like, all right, I'm done. I'm out of here. And you hear me yelling in the back. I'm like, fuck you, leave him in the cage. You're in there for 5 minutes. I go, don't let him out of the fucking cage. So we locked his ass in the cage, and then Chris is just kind of like, toying with him and peppering him. And Sean Strickland's like, knock this fucking dude out. So we've had some wild ones in here, man.
I fucking love that so much. I think society would be a lot better off if, people actually got punched in the face a little bit more when they said some dumb shit.
More,
I think
bro.
That's what it was 20 years ago. You can't just talk like that without getting rocked in the face.
We have a huge sign over our cage when you walk in. It says human resources. That's it. Awesome. That is our human resources department. If you got a fucking problem, take somebody in there and figure that shit out.
Yeah, that's how it used to be, right? And that's why people always wonder after a fight. Every time, I'm showing UFC to someone who doesn't really get it, after the fight when they're hugging, everyone's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, they were just beating the shit out of each other for 25 minutes. Like, after you do that, there isn't really anything left to be said, right? Like, that's why there's that respect. Like, we just figured it out. It doesn't matter what was said beforehand. If we were talking about, fucking dogs or, whatever was going on in the Izzy fight. But, after the 25 minutes, there's not much
it's all
more.
Respect.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, man, sorry for running. I mean, we could probably chat all day, but yeah, we really appreciate it again, man. Best of luck. And we'll definitely be out there in the spring at some point.
Yeah, and I'll let you text, Eric. I'll let you know about this weekend. I don't know what you got going on, but maybe we can link up.
I'm here all week, bro. So let me know when you get in town or whatever you guys got going on, man. Love to hook up.
All right, man.
Take it easy on my Raiders this week too, bro. Take it easy on these guys.
Hey, it's a mug. We need this one. Oh man.